Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, The Transformation Imperative. I'm Greg Gorbach. Joining me today are Warren Pruitt from Colgate-Palmolive. Warren will talk about what they've done with digital machine health. Vikas Parikh, who will focus on the transformation imperative as viewed by LyondellBasell. And Tracey Mole, who will talk about scaling digital transformation at Evonik. After these presentations, the speakers will be joined by additional panelists and we will answer questions from the audience. You may submit a question at any time during today's session. To do so, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You might have to move your mouse a little bit to see it. With that, let's get started. First up is my presentation about how to execute a successful digital transformation.
Today's topic is the transformation imperative, and I'm going to speak about how to execute a successful digital transformation. I'm going to focus on a number of elements that one needs to consider in executing a successful digital transformation, starting with identifying the key business measures and then ending with executing adaptively. I'm not going to go through all of them here, but I will go through them one by one. First thing you need to do is think about your corporation, your organization's key business measures. What are the financial measures that the executives pay attention to, and then what are the real goals that your company is really working towards? The environmental and social and governance, reducing energy and waste and water and emissions, human rights, all these other, sustainability, raw materials, risk management, transparency, all these, can impact you in a good way or a bad way as you go about your transformation activities. So you need to be prepared to help drive some change through the organization. One of the characteristics about transformation, digital transformation, is there's so many targets to choose from, ranging from, plant floor or engineering or supply chain or business, smart services and smart products. All these need to be updated and digitalized. So how do you do it? One guiding principle is to focus on competitive excellence. And for a lot here in our audience today, it's going to be starting with the plant floor and operations. We see a rise in titles like Chief Digital Officer or Digital Transformation Lead. And it's a real challenge for these folks in these roles to act as an effective change agent within their organization. But that's what they need to do, and they need to take the lead in identifying and validating and piloting and scaling transformational change, and finding ways to collaborate, and helping make sure the organization has the right mix of skills. Often to do that, it's difficult to do it on your own. It's difficult to do it in the conventional way of thinking that your company's been doing things. I mean, let's face it, this is a complex thing. It's multidimensional. There are many departments involved and many externalities involved. It extends throughout the value chain. There are going to be a lot of people that can help you, but also a lot that could derail you without you thinking about it too much. So how do you anticipate that, and how do you go forward in an environment like this when there's so much change going on? Well, one thing that we found is effective is to have a network of peers, both within your company and industry, which many do already, but also companies in other sectors and other companies. How are they doing it? What have they seen? If it's often the case that with the right set of connections, you can find somebody who's been down this path before, and can help you, advise you about what you might want to do or what you might want to look out for. And just as well, it's sometimes difficult to validate and justify transformation initiatives. And if somebody's been there, or maybe can share a technique that's been successful in another company and in another culture, you may get some ideas from that. So along the way, you need to develop a digital innovation strategy. So this can be tricky. You need to figure out where your company's maturity is, and come up with a realistic action path. This has to involve both the executive C-levels and the line of business leadership. So at the end of the day, though, it depends on focusing on specific business needs and building a business case that's grounded in strategic direction as well as operational realities. The key is you've got to be able to change, and you've got to think about the business process from outside in. You've got to think about moving from operational excellence to competitive excellence. So what I mean by that is you need a customer-centric lens to help you identify and define high-priority strategic initiatives, and then map them to granular processes and people and things that can carry them out. You need a strategic rationale for considering the means of change. It could be some kind of technology, it could be analytics, could be digital twin or cloud or something, but you need to avoid the shiny object decision making on technology and vendors. So part of the challenge is in creating a digital innovation strategy is developing an understanding among your leadership as to the difficulty, breadth, and benefits of transformation, and then gaining agreement as to why a specific set of changes will be undertaken. And we help companies with this. You should recognize that where most companies are going to need to mature their organization in some way or another. Many have made some progress in this area in recent months and years, but it's something to really take seriously. So that means investing in transformation initiatives as a strategic measure. And don't fool yourself to think you're ahead of the game or you're way ahead of somebody else, because right now, it's a struggle, and it may not be obvious, but a lot of companies are working on this. You need to think about the possibility of new business processes and services and models, and think about data as well as technology and how to change, because you may want, you need to move away from the notion of incremental change and move towards a leapfrog concept, if that makes sense for you. And then, an organization has to mature basically across three categories of industrial operations in order to move beyond doing a lot of pilots and experiments and move into real scaled solutions. So you need to mature your people and culture, your analytics and data technology, as well as your operational infrastructure. Next bullet is, next element for successful change is anticipating the 21st century industrial ecosystem. So what this tries to show here is that in today's world, and increasingly in tomorrow's world, production plants are moving from the old model where everybody was involved, worked for the company and worked in the plant, by and large, or near the plant. And today it's really changing quite a bit. So there are internal actors as well as external actors. So you may have your own employees in the plant, but you may also have third parties responsible for spare parts or asset performance or specialized services of one kind or another, and they're critically important to keeping the production flow going and keeping things working. And customers may also have some visibility into your plant. So that's one dimension of this, of what we mean by 21st century industrial digital ecosystem. But another dimension is that a lot of the workforce is changing, and the notion of workers in the plant is also changing. So that worker may not be local in a plant, and that worker may work in a nearby city or working from home, and may indeed support multiple plants and travel to the plants only as required. And then if there's an occasion where an expert of some kind or other is needed, today we can access that expert support anywhere and any time around the globe. So as you get a flavor, it's going to be complex. The innovation and speed of implementation is going to be critical. You want to be able to move these things fast. Still, you need to be able to sort of balance the creativity and innovation versus control and predictability for your programs. There's a skills transformation dimension that needs to be addressed as part of this complexity. You're going to have some cultural resistance, so you need to plan for that and think about how to manage the human element. There's going to be some change in your core competencies, very likely, and you'll anticipate resistance at each step along the way, so be prepared. And then some of the common missteps to look out for are lack of direction, an orientation around technology and not solutions, and sometimes a kind of an organizational vision that's too limited, so that you can't really grow beyond it. So those are some of the things that change agents need to take to heart. And then lastly, the execution should be adaptive, is the way we talk about it. So that means a number of different things. There's a culture that's comfortable with change and expects quick change and ongoing change. That means evolving from a sort of a staid and stable and predictable steady state to an organization that's more dynamic and embraces innovation and change as core skills and values. Some companies are farther along that path than others, but it's a path that we all need to get on. You need to have a vision for where you're going as a corporation or as a company, and the innovation projects need to have their place within that vision. Still, even with all this, you're not going to get it right every time, and the expectation that you started down a path, so you have to finish, you're going to have to be a little more flexible with that. So turning on a dime is okay, and scaling as quickly as possible is important, unless something else changes in the environment, which it could be a new competitive situation or market change. You need to be ready, and that's the reality today. And then the other thing we say is question. When you hear "that's how we do it here," those things are very good and have served the company well, but maybe there's a better way. So think about that. Finally, it's very likely that the cultural norms need to be disrupted. You have to, of course, we touched on this, account for the human element. It's key and critical, I would say, to identify holes in your existing peer network and find a way to fill those gaps and find peers that can help you. Think about investing to improve the organization's maturity as part of the process of transformation. Rethink the why. When you run into a roadblock for some reason, sometimes it's helpful to consider whether your organization is asking the right questions or not. When developing a strategy, it's got to reflect reality but can't be held back by it. And finally, be willing to change even the current philosophies of data management and cybersecurity. So all those things that may be sacrosanct in a company still need to be considered and looked at. So with that, I'm going to close up this presentation and look forward to taking any questions later on. Thank you very much.
So I think you can see, I think we all recognize that, this notion of the transformation imperative has really caught on. Everybody knows we have to transform. And I've just tried to provide a few thoughts there about what to expect and how to go about it. So next up, we'll hear from Warren Pruitt. Warren?
Hi, I'm Warren Pruitt, Vice President of Global Engineering Services for Colgate-Palmolive. I'm here today to discuss our strategic relationship we have with Augury and the success that we've had with our digital machine health. To give you a bit of to frame out our strategic priorities that we have in the supply chain, they're built on three pickets: growth, efficiency, and sustainability. In this discussion, I'm going to focus on our efficiency picket via digital initiatives that we are working with Augury that's going to help improve our output on our production lines, reducing our downtime, and optimizing our operations, mainly around maintenance and the labor that goes with it, as well as our MRO spend when we're looking at moving from a preventative maintenance program to a predictive maintenance program. So what is machine health? Machine health is how we diagnose machine health and performance issues before they happen using AI and IoT. This also provides an end-to-end solution delivered as a service. It drives faster and more dramatic value and digitization for leading industrial companies like Colgate-Palmolive. So what was our challenge? Our challenge was supply chain interruptions and capacity requirements are reducing the available capital for strategic growth. So the goals obviously were to increase that yield, lower our operating costs, and mitigate manufacturing risks via digital solutions. So why was Augury the right partner to meet these challenges? If I take a step back, we actually had went and looked on the market for various solutions and piloted several different technologies around sensors to manage our machine health vision. The benefit, though, that Augury offered from the start, they fully understood Colgate's needs. They came to the table right away to listen to us, hear what we actually wanted, and to develop the right solution. They also, their platform also offered immediate benefits based on the analytics platform. And let me explain that a little bit. They were not just installing sensors for Colgate and then developing an algorithm and analytics around Colgate's equipment specifically. They've already had deployed to other companies the same or similar technologies. So they've already built their platform and their algorithms to where a pump is just a pump. So whether it's a Colgate pump, whether it's another company's pump, that technology is already there. So we've seen the immediate impact on our equipment. They also offered something that nobody on the market at that time offered, was to integrate with our Wonderware MES solution, which we thought was that next step of evolving our machine health platform. We also had the alignment to work with other technology partners to pair technology to drive bigger integrated solutions, which I'll get into a bit later. And we both shared a common vision of immediate benefits, but also future developments. What were the keys to implementation success? Number one, we had shared priorities between the teams being the Augury team, the Colgate global team, and then the teams on the ground that were deploying this technology. We had an alignment of a timeline. So we sat with not only ourselves with Augury and the global level, but with the various regions and plants, and developed a time frame in which we wanted to get this implemented and launched. The on-the-ground teams fully embraced technology and immediately responded to alerts. And in fact, Augury does carry a KPI that they measure, which is time to response. So Colgate is considered one of the best in industry, where we were at just above 3 days to respond to a problem on an alert from a machine health issue. And what have we learned in the process? that enabled us to scale the program. It really was sharing the benefits and learnings across regions. And I'll give you an example. When we initially piloted the augury technology on, I think, 35 machines in our Morristown, Tennessee factory, within a 5-month period of that pilot, we were in 2 machine health alerts. When we took the machines down, planned that maintenance, repaired it, and got the machines back up and running, we realized that those two events basically paid for the entire annual subscription for the plant to be fully fitted out. So the value was shown to our end-to-end leaders in the supply chain, and this was a very quick adoption. We went through North America, we're going into Latin America, we're going into Europe, and then Asia in 2022. Now, everything was going as planned when we started the global rollout at the end of 2019 and going into Q1 of 2020. And then, of course, as everybody has been impacted, the pandemic hit with the COVID-19. Now, that hit around in the middle of March for us in terms of when we started working from home and managing our plants differently in the way in which we worked with OEMs and other suppliers and vendors. We quickly, though, regrouped with Augury's team, where we did have a pause of about 4 to 6 weeks. However, we quickly got back together. We decided to do a quick test on a remote deployment, which is installation, the startup, and the training requirements. And we targeted our Morristown, Tennessee facility. Within 2 or 3 days of running that quick pilot, we both came back to the table and said that we can continue this remotely using virtual tools that we have also deployed as a result of the pandemic to assure that we were not creating any issues on new equipment installations, deployments such as augury, new product development, and other areas of opportunity to use the remote technologies that we had deployed. So from an operational impact, as I had said, we're looking at reduced unplanned downtime costs, reduced asset costs, and then avoiding production losses. And as another example, the Hills Pet Nutrition plants that have now deployed the augury solution, they've come back and said that in if I'm not mistaken, in the last 3 to 4 months, having 23 machine health alerts, those 23 alerts have basically paid for their entire 6 plants to be fitted out, and the entire, on an annual base, the subscription costs for those 6 plants, just in 23 events. So if we really extrapolate that to all the plants that we have, both Colgate and Hills around the world, that's millions of dollars saved. And today, this has been one of the fastest adoptions and expansions of new technologies such as this that we've been able to deploy, where everybody on the ground and at all levels have fully embraced the augury solution. So from a change management standpoint, obviously going from a preventative maintenance and sometimes even an opinion-based equipment analysis, going to a predictive and fact-based analysis, that does drive a big change within your operations. So, we are looking now at data, as I said, data-driven decision-making, transition of maintenance expenditure from preventative to predictive. So now we're really focused on repairing equipment when it needs to be repaired, not based on, again, an OEM's recommended a repair or anything else. We're really focused on managing it from a predictive analytics standpoint. Remote and virtual expertise. We've also now been able to go plant to plant between our common categories, where when machines are having issues, we can share those learnings between our facilities to assure that they're taking those learnings and making the application. So greater expertise and autonomy at the plant level. And this is really part of our digital roadmap. And as a result of not only deploying Augury, but even during the pandemic here, we've seen a real acceleration in these deployments and driving our digital roadmap forward. And it's increased our cross-functional collaboration as well. Lack of travel has not slowed us down in any way, whether it was between plants or working with partners like Augury. And now the way forward is really the operation, from an operational performance. And I think I mentioned this in the beginning that I would talk about this is really it's not only taking the machine health and the operational data generated, but it's also then feeding that into other work we're doing around digital twins. So now not only in our digital twin solution, and I'll use our Hills Pet Nutrition as an example on the extrusion process, is that the digital twin was being set up to manage quality parameters so that it would help us reduce losses, improve changeover times, and get the extruders going up, ramped up faster. Now we're looking at pairing the Augury machine health data with that digital twin to not only look at the quality parameters, but also as machines wear, as these extruders wear, as they age, the Augury data is going to give us the ability to feed that progression of the equipment getting older or maybe wearing out a bit, feeding that data, those data points into the digital twin, that then what we foresee is to allow us to be able to determine what formulas of the pet food run better on which extruders based on not only the digital twin data, but also the machine health analytics around the age and wear and tear and repairs of equipment, so that we could determine before we produce formulas on the extruders where they should actually be produced on to have the best operational performance. So from an operational performance, it's intelligent process control, it's dynamic production scheduling, because remember, when you can get the predictive analytics around taking the equipment down and planning that properly based on the machine health, your planning program of how you're going to run and operate your facilities is going to vastly improve. And overall, your performance, your output performance improvement as well. So with that, thank you very much. And I'll be looking forward to any questions that come up during the event. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Warren. You really caught my attention with the millions in projected savings slide. Next up is Vikas Parikh. Welcome, Vikas.
Thank you, Greg. Hi, everyone. I'm Vikas Parikh. I'm the Chief Architect, and I'm also responsible for the finance product team at LyondellBasell. Today, I'll talk to you about 4 key imperatives that I think are very important to a successful transformation journey. First, put people first. Obvious, but very important. We need to help people rethink their potential. We need to continue to close the gap between the talent supply and demand. You're not going to win this battle. So you have to think a little bit differently on how you want to think about your workforce strategy. Chasing technologies and skill set for the ever-changing technology buzzwords is another recipe for failure. So the way to think about it is look at the core competencies, things that are going to really become important for the future of skills, apart from the technology skills. As long as a person has the technology acumen, keywords are going to be look for soft skills like adaptability, look for soft skills like curiosity, look for soft skills like flexibility, inclusiveness. You have to really develop your workforce, one, to retain and deliver on your transformation and make it a fun journey. How, couple of aspects of it is you really have to invest in your people. One way of doing that is provide them with training. Training in the future is going to be on demand. It's going to be dynamically delivered, and it will be tailored. So you have to adapt to different training mechanism as well. So that's the first side of it. I always remember when my boss says, what's the key word for 2020 and 2021 when it comes to organizations, and the only word that comes to our mind is empathy, right? So be empathetic and invest in your workforce. Second, drive change from the top. And what I don't mean this by driving an hierarchical organization. Totally not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say there is you need to have a set of leaders who have the right competency, who have a high level of integrity, who are very value driven, and they come with a common mindset to drive a culture of, I will use the two buzzwords of diversity and inclusiveness. The way I think about it is reverse that and talk about IND, inclusiveness and diversity. And the reason why I say that is there is a study that was done where, in order to cultivate an innovation mindset in your employee base, what is really important apart from diversity is inclusiveness. And a real good comparison, a real good study was two equally diverse organizations, one inclusive and the other one not. The inclusive organization had a multiplier factor of 11 times on their digital mindset, innovation mindset within their employees. So it's very important to drive inclusiveness. And the three key ways I think about driving inclusiveness is creating an empowering environment, empower your people. Second is allowing bold leadership, allowing experimentation, failing fast. And third, through inspiration and collaboration. So you really have to cultivate a culture and environment that fosters inclusiveness, and that's another recipe for a successful transformation. Third, data. Data is everywhere. It's becoming so cheap to store data as well. Does that mean you want to get every possible data within your organization? Maybe, maybe not, right? But the key here is act on data insights. Harness your data, make decisions, generate that value. Move from a spectrum of descriptive to a predictive to a prescriptive analytics. Show progress, right? The way I think about, data without insights are trivial, and insights without actions are worthless, right? So think about data to really drive hyper personalization to everybody, including your current employees, your potential future employees, your customers, your partners, and your suppliers. This is, you really have to think about using data to get to a very hyper-personalized environment, which is where we are all driving towards. The fourth is prioritize your technology and your portfolio. And what I mean by that is have a current forward or even better, a future back strategy. Understand what are the big mega trends that are going to impact your industry. Work with some of your thought leaders and strategy leaders within your organization to be on the same page as to how they are thinking about the organization. And then apply those implications to your organizations to prioritize the technology investments that you want to make. Try to not customize everything, right? Think in terms of system of record, system of innovation, system of differentiation. When it comes to system of records, this should be everything as close to industry standards as possible. Let's not reinvent a wheel. Let's not spend a lot of time. Spend a lot of time on your system of innovation, system of differentiation, and align your technology needs towards those and prioritize them. So having a future back strategy or a current forward strategy and aligning with your leadership is very important. So to sum it up, the 4 points, as I mentioned: put people first, drive change from the top, harness data, and prioritize your technology. And I'll leave you with a nice quote that is so relevant for the times that we are in. Winston Churchill once said, "Never waste a good crisis." So good luck to everybody, and thank you for your time. Over to you, Greg.
Okay, thanks very much, Vikas. That's terrific. Excellent comments, and I think those 4 main points that you made, we can come back to those, and maybe during the panel discussion explore a little bit how how that's impacted you and your company. So with that, I would like to introduce Tracey Mole. Tracey?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this session and giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about the digital transformation journey and the experience that we've had at Evonik, especially pertaining to scaling the digital transformation at an enterprise level. I look forward to sharing these experiences with you in the next few moments. So first, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tracey Mole. I'm the Director of Technology Deployment and Digitalization here in Evonik, based out of the North American region. I'm a chemical engineer by trade, and by no means am I a data scientist or data expert. Instead, my specialty is in change management and how to successfully integrate technology and methodologies into manufacturing and into the operations and the people in manufacturing. So this is really my focus and going forward with our discussion today about the strategy of how to digitalize an enterprise at scale. So a little bit about Evonik. We're a medium-sized specialty chemical companies, extraordinarily diverse. We have a wide portfolio of chemicals as well as people and locations around the world. So this is what creates some of our biggest challenge of how do we have or push forward a digitalization journey which fits and standardized across the organization. We're in a lot of different arenas. Our materials find themselves into all kinds of different products, but our manufacturing processes and plants are just as diverse as our products. This comes one from the technologies that we have to use, and the other from the way that the companies come together. So we do a lot of acquisition of other companies. So when we bring those operations into our network, we have to account for that when we start discussing about digitalization across an enterprise. So to illustrate that complexity, I show you here is the footprint across North America of all of our locations. Again, keeping in mind each of these dots here have their own technology, their own local culture, and also have their own individual level of maturity when it comes to digitalization. So the question is, how do we leverage the newest, greatest machine learning AI capabilities that are on the market across an enterprise that is so diverse? And this is our challenge moving forward. What we have here is some interesting information from Deloitte when they surveyed CEOs around the world about the most important advancements in manufacturing. And what they found is that predictive analytics and connectivity ranked number 1 and number 2 on that list. As this pertains to the Evonik strategy, what we've found is that we have to focus on this connection layer, right? We need to get to the point where we can identify and solve problems faster, not just in one particular place, but across the enterprise. So with this in mind, what we're doing is we're focusing our resources, not necessarily taking them away from AI and machine learning, but using their knowledge and understanding of the direction we need to go to help build this foundation layer of smart connectivity. Our main goal, we have to avoid one-offs. So what's typical is that we find that with AI or with machine learning, we do solve problems, but they're very hard to deploy to other locations across the company. So what we need is this data foundation. So when we find a good solution or build one internally, we have the capability to leverage this in other locations that may have a similar problem. Basically, it's not just the performance and capability of the new technologies that are on the market, but how fast can we leverage them? How fast can we take advantage of them in Evonik? So this is our strategy moving forward, focusing on this connectivity layer so that we have this consistent foundation where we can leverage things on a much larger scale. So this is an example that we use internally to kind of explain the situation and what it is we're trying to do. And it works well because I think a lot of people can understand this and relate to it. So if we look at our current IT, OT asset data infrastructure, think of it as a nest of electrical cords you see here in the picture. Again, I think everyone's seen one of these in real life, whether it's around Christmas or the holidays or celebrations where you have a lot of lights, right? So if you think about this, it's difficult to maintain. Every plug requires some effort to maintain this connectivity. If you try to plug in an additional set of lights, you have to account for it somehow. Or if one set goes out, you then have to play the game to figure out where that's connected and replace it. So solutions are also complicated to transfer because every location has a unique nest of connectivity. So this is a problem we realized we didn't really know we had it until we started to make these connections. So what it is we actually really need is a much larger standardized power strip, right? We know exactly where everything goes. You have a preset number of connectivity points. You know how to connect it. If we were to have one of these installed at every location, they're always the same. You ultimately would have plug and play convenience. So you could have homogeneous solutions that you could just slip into your network depending on which situation you're in. So this is our long-term objective. So we're aware of what we have, which is all of these different types of plugs, and we know what we need. We need them all connected in a uniform and organized fashion. So to go with this example a little bit farther, there's really two ways you can do this. One is the manual procedure, basically cut all of these plugs off and rewire them. So this is an extraordinarily manual process, very time consuming, has a very high possibility for error, and you have to test each one of these connections individually to make sure the connections were done correctly. In addition, this requires a certain amount of skill, right? This requires an electrician to be able to do this. Well, all of us back before COVID did quite a bit of traveling, right? And everybody who's traveled internationally has solved this problem, right? And this is with a plug adapter. So ultimately, what we've all done is use a functional tool that was expertly designed for this plug and play functionality. In addition, if there was some malfunction or manufacturing error, the product would be recalled, right? So you have some guarantee that the design is sound. Another advantage is this requires minimal technical skills, right? We've all done it with little to no training. It's pretty simple to figure out. So again, this is a pretty simple example, but it is very pertinent to what we're doing in the digital transformation. Because you'll see that this is more or less a one-for-one comparison to what we have in our assets, the digital assets, and what we need, right? We have a lot of different plugs, a lot of different data in different sources, and what we need is to have all of this connected in a way that we can take advantage of all of that data. And what we were doing previously was a very manual process, flying our data scientists around the world and literally rewiring our connections. However, now we've found an expertly designed functional tool using machine learning techniques, which will make these connections for us. And it's proven to be quite successful and really helped us out a great deal when we start talking about speed of deployment and rollout, as well as resources when it comes to really deploying this on a large scale. The Element Unified Toolbox has really been useful to us in meeting our goals and objectives to integrate all of our legacy systems, as well as prepare ourselves for new machine learning tools that are either being developed internally or that we're researching on the market. This is possible because of the contextualization effects that all of our data is in a clean and format that is consistent among all of our operations. In addition, it gives us the ability to evergreen or govern our tools and our asset models, right? Quite typical in manufacturing. Not long after a drawing or a database is developed, it doesn't take long for it to fall out of accuracy, right? As more data is introduced into the manufacturing process, or the process itself changes, right? So there are tools available and through this system to help us stay on top of that and make sure that our asset model is accurate at all times. So this has really been the correct tool for us with the objective of reaching this data foundation layer as quickly as possible across a wide scope of the company. Okay, so we've developed our strategy and our objectives, and we've identified the correct tool to use. But the question still remains of, how are you going to implement your strategy? And what we've done is adapted the Agile or Scrum approach from the software industry, trying to modify this and have this operating in a chemical company. So finding basically new solutions to old problems and new ways of working with the intention of speed. Some advantages that we found, we were able to tackle some problems that we really did not know the solution to. But we were confident that we would find a way to meet our goals and to achieve our objectives. It's also a great way where you can maximize value and minimize risk. And this is because of the very rapid feedback loop, right? You're always in this continuous improvement mode of how can we do things better? How can we do things more quickly, more efficiently? So that's proven to be very successful in deploying our data layer. Some challenges we have is, you have to choose to use this methodology wisely. It's not very effective when you're in a situation where you know how to do something, you're just trying to speed it up on its own. There's other techniques for that. This is really for a situation where you're not sure every little obstacle you're going to come across, but you're confident to find ways around it. What's also great here is the team that you're able to use. So when you have the correct tool, you don't have to have quite the size team necessary or allocated to a project. Just the support team behind them, giving them the support that they need is key. So some of the exciting results that we've been able to achieve so far really stem from using the correct tool, starting off small, just moving fast, being prepared to fail often, but learning from that and improving continuously. And this is really just wholeheartedly taking on this Scrum Agile approach, right? But some of the positive things that we've seen, when we used to start or previously engage into a digitalization project, we would expect that 70 to 80% of this time necessary for the project would be allocated to connectivity issues, getting the correct access, getting all of the data in the right format. By approaching this problem on a much larger scale, we've really seen that now, we're able to approach digitalization projects and achieve them much faster at a much lower investment. And this is all because we're able to deploy our data layer, our connectivity layer at such a fast pace. So we're operating and deploying this at more than twice as fast as we were before, using a fraction of the resources. So this has very much been a step in the right direction for us. And ultimately what this does is it allows our data scientists and data experts to be exactly that. They can concentrate on being experts and looking for continuous improvement and value generating analysis. Another interesting benefit has been that this easier access, or let's say availability of data, clean contextualized data, allows access from multiple levels of organization. Ultimately, the plant personnel, when they have access to this data, they're able to do simple dashboards or analysis themselves, no longer needing to involve a data scientist because they were previously restricted by this connectivity problem. So this has now been freed up and more ideas flow freely from them because they're able to do investigations on their own. So this has definitely proven to be a great benefit. Another interesting aspect is we can much easier evaluate and run proof of concepts with innovation partner companies. So of course, there's a lot of movement and innovation in the digitalization marketplace, a lot of machine learning, AI tools, but these have to be tested and proven, right? So we now have a foundation which we can run these POCs, which is great. And in the end, our ultimate goal is to achieve sustainable value. And this increased connectivity and single point of truth for data has lent itself to a faster and more widespread deployments. We spoke earlier about one-offs. Right now, we are in a position where when we find a digital solution to a problem, we're in a position where we can scale this and deploy it across the company and generate much greater value. So this is the direction we're moving. We still have plenty of work to do, but we're very excited to see where the future takes us. So with that, I look forward to any questions that we have in the question round. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks very much, Tracey. Scaling is where a lot of companies get tripped up, so really appreciated your insights here, and pretty sure I recognize that nest of connections. So it's time for us to take questions now. So I'm going to invite all of our speakers and panelists to turn on their webcams, please. All right, I think that looks good. And you'll see a few new faces here. So I'm just going to go one at a time here. Artem Krupanev, please introduce yourself and tell us why you're on our panel today.
Sure, absolutely. My name is Artem, VP Strategy at Augury, and really a pleasure to be here together with one of our best supporters, Warren Pruitt. So thanks for being in the panel as well, from Colgate-Palmolive. Warren gave a pretty good overview of what we do and who we are in his presentation. But essentially, we're a provider of machine health, as a service, and we solve a vertical but essentially very critical problem for the industry, and we do it end to end, from sensors all the way to outcomes, and then adoption, and of course scaling. We've been a part of the transformation imperative with a wide range of partners and customers across the industry, whether it's companies in the CPG space, food and beverage, chemicals, or any other continuous process industry for some time. We're very familiar with the challenges of both introducing technology, creating the products, and then the adoption and scaling. And so today we're in a good position to really provide value there and speak about it, not just about the deployments that we've had and the scale that we've had with customers, but on a wider scale for the industry, some of the learnings that we have in really bringing some of that adoption to a science and being able to scale rapidly. So okay, with that, thanks.
Atul Mishra, please introduce yourself and tell us why you're on our panel today.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Greg. A very good afternoon to you, our speakers, panelists, and attendees. My name is Atul, and I head the process manufacturing unit at TCS for Central, Midwest, and South regions in North America. And in my role, I'm responsible for managing the clients belonging to process, agri, food production, etc., including LyondellBasell. So thanks, Vikas, for joining the session. At the outset, I would like to thank all the distinguished speakers for their inspiring and thought-provoking success stories, I would call them. Now, I might sound a repeat, but we are here, but because, our world as we know it is going through a big metamorphosis driven by the economic and social changes due to the pandemic. Transformations are imperative, whether it's people, technology, I would say enterprises, or the whole sustenance of the ecosystem. I was just reading somewhere that 50% of the world's GDP will need to be digitalized in the next couple of years. That's huge, right? So with that said, I think the silver lining in this whole situation is that it provides us a great opportunity to accelerate our digital transformation journey, which I believe is not an option anymore, but it's a time-bound requirement for the enterprises to grow. So with these thoughts in mind, I plan to join this session to share and hear views from our fellow participants on this. Thanks again, Greg, for having me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Atul. And Steve Beamer, please introduce yourself and tell us why you're on our panel today.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Steve Beamer. I'm in charge of customer success at Element, and I have 37 years of industry background. I retired having worked in my last job as a VP of Reliability and Maintenance for BP's upstream, and in the last year and a half of my role there, I was leading some of the digital transformation work for the business. And Element was a key part of helping us scale and be successful. And I was so excited about it that when I retired from BP, I came to Element to try to bring this to industry faster. And so we've been working with Tracey and the Evonik team, along with some of our other customers, to help them scale their transformation efforts a lot faster. So I'm very passionate about that. I've kind of sat on both sides of the fence, so I can give you some good perspective from both sides. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions today.
All right, thanks a lot, Steve. So let's just get started with a couple of general questions here. But so Warren, you spoke about how some of your projects kind of paid for themselves and then paid for really a pretty broad deployment with some of these things, which is kind of interesting. But one of the questions that goes along with this is, did you anticipate that in advance? Or in other words, did you have to do a big ROI justification and sell job in advance, or was it just all gravy?
No, I mean, when we again, as I had said, we were scouting for sensor technologies that were going to help us along our journey on our digital roadmap, our automation roadmap, but also helping us, specifically in this case, moving from a preventative to a predictive a maintenance platform. So our test and learn strategy is very quick. Process. By that I mean, since we're located here in the U.S., many of our pilots are best deployed in one of our facilities. Which, by the way, since we are multi-category, we've got all of our categories and technologies are well represented within North America. To then move into Europe or Asia or Latin America. So from that standpoint. Over the last several years since we've deployed the end-to-end supply chain strategy, the end-to-end leaders have really embraced the global engineering function at the center for identifying those types of technologies. So this was really easy to just get in. And again, Augury and the other sensor platforms we did look at, they stepped up to the table to offer us up, that ability to do a quick test and learn, to get the learnings, and then, in a couple of cases that they didn't work out. In the Augury case, we quickly got results that were very favorable, and that's where the end-to-end leaders really jumped on board and realized, what that capability and potential was going to be on a larger scale base.
Okay, thanks, Warren. So I'd just like to open it up to the other panelists. Is there a general problem or issue with getting this kind of an ROI for some of these innovative and transformative projects? Or not? We'll move on to another question.
I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, I think that anytime you're in the innovation realm, right, you're going to have, I wouldn't say headwind or resistance, but you have to do a lot of convincing, right? What are your assumptions? What are they based on? What's realistic? Also in a time frame. So I think that there's definitely challenges there, but a lot of this is the humanistic part. It's the curiosity aspect of being able to explain what it is you're trying to do. So you had mentioned the nest of cables example. So we worked very hard to find a good example that everyone in the company at any level could relate to. And this is why we describe what we're trying to accomplish digitally in a way that everyone can get around. And it really goes all the way to that ROI discussion, right? So people can really understand where the value lies, especially in digital, right?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that, I struggled with it quite a bit when I was in industry, and I see my customers struggling with it a lot now. A lot of these digital initiatives help you move faster and scale. So the real benefits are actually getting your returns out of your business back faster, or leveraging an existing investment better and getting more value out of it. And a lot of leaders are struggling with that. It's like, why do I need to buy one more thing? I've already paid for this. I've already paid for something else. And so you really do have to work hard on getting your story right. A lot of companies are not in the mode of let's go experiment.
And just to add to that, it's very important that you partner with the right business partner within your organization to come up with that value, right? So there's no IT project. It is always something that every project, every program is a business program. So it's that partnership with the function, the forward-looking view with the futuristic leader within that organization, and coming up with those ideas is really important, to tell the story, but then more importantly drive it through data, which is what is the real value, right? So at Lyondell, we look at it as, does it impact our EBITDA, right? What is the line item within our financials it's going to impact? If it's productivity savings, yeah, it's good, but we'll prioritize anything that's hard savings over soft ones.
Okay, thanks.
And I just as to circle back on that, and the one thing that over the past, we started our automation roadmap probably about 2.5 years ago, and of course in 2020 it significantly accelerated way beyond what we even thought, just from a standpoint of when there's no travel, when you've got restrictions in your facilities, but you've still got to deliver the business. We saw a real acceleration of these technologies. But on the ROI, we've had these discussions a lot. And, if you go back even to, let's say 2 years, 3 years, there was a different profile or expectation on what an investment should deliver in terms of an ROI. But when you start looking at these smart technologies and robotics and, just that your whole roadmap, we had a recognition that, if you're going to deliver your strategy, we know that in some cases the ROIs are not going to be there. Some places, North America, Europe, where you've got high labor costs, they're still going to, meet your criteria. But we also then realize that strategically, and I'm making this up, but going to an Asia or an Africa where you've got a lower cost labor base, and a lot of people, there's other strategic initiatives around. If we're going to do this, it might not pay back within the conventional sense, but I'm going to reduce X amount or X percentage of labor. I'm going to reduce, the risks associated with ergonomics and an aging workforce, et cetera, et cetera. So we did try to start, aside from just looking at the conventional methodology of payback periods, and I think all companies have probably very similar, but we realized that moving forward, we've got to add some strategic intent around that, so that if ROIs were not necessarily meant on that basis, we then turn to a strategic intent of, is this going to deliver upon our 2025 strategy, right? So I think there was a paradigm shift. And again, culturally, I mean, even getting it down to the plant level, to get people to understand we are pivoting a bit here because we've got a strategy and we need to deliver on that strategy. And if that plan, or if these investments deliver against that plan, then we're going to have to take some strategic decisions on these investments, knowing that they're not necessarily going to pay out in a conventional ROI sense.
Yeah, and it can be a challenge to try to justify something that nobody's done before. Mm-hmm. But that's where we're at. We're all here. I have a question. I think I'm going to start with you, Tracey, but everybody please feel free to jump in. And that's a question about how long does it take to make the data transformation to become useful and to avoid the one-off work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say that really depends on your rollout strategy, right? So if you're smart about how you choose your locations, you're purposefully looking for lighthouses, right? So you want to illustrate, very similar to what Warren told us about, right? Went after some good savings first to get the momentum going. So when you're starting to do a transformation, it makes sense for you to do sister plants or locations that you know share a lot of the similar pain points, just so that you can leverage that quick deployment from point A to point B, right? Because in the end, the first year or two, you're still trying to illustrate the technology is working. I really like what Warren has done and said, oh, look at the savings that we have. This already is going to pay for us to finish or do the next step. I mean, I really like that. I think that's very effective. So to your question, yes, I think that that's part of your strategy when you start to roll out at a higher pace.
We've seen this from the beginning, say take it 5 or 6 years ago, where there was that question for, digital initiatives and transformation. Do you build a foundation for the future and that level of change management, or do you try to use kind of traditional models to calculate ROI and get immediate impact, right? And it was a trade-off between the two. I faced it, and really a lot of our thinking process early on was, well, can we do both? And then exactly, Tracey, to your point, can we take then the early traction and the funding that you get from that early ROI and translate that into the bigger picture, and then build that momentum and help our customers build that momentum within their organizations. And of course, that is probably considerably easier to do if you focus on a specific use cases versus try to connect many different layers together. But in the case of machine health and performance, that turned out for us to be, I would say, a little bit easier. That strategy turned out to be a little bit easier to do than in some other cases.
Okay, thanks.
I'd like to add a little bit to that as well. We've invested heavily as industry in the last generation of technology. And meanwhile, the world has been changing for the last 10 or 15 years, and we haven't really invested in that. So it used to be really hard to get your data organized, and it's really not anymore with the new technologies that are out there. And not realizing that, I made this mistake myself when I was still in my last role, is that we tried to organize all the data we thought we had to get organized before we started. And you really don't need to. You need that great use case like Warren presented, and you go after only the data you need to do that and get that cleaned up, and clean up as you go so that you get value and you get progress. Because what you find is that data you cleaned up for the first project becomes useful for the next project, and you have less data to clean up, and it sort of snowballs on itself.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's the reason, right? So Greg, in your presentation, you talked about some new roles emerging, right? Like Chief Digital Officer. We're also seeing Chief Data Officer, right? Big time roles coming up. And I believe the reason there is that many of these companies, which are traditionally, let's say an agriculture company, which has been in the business for, let's say, 50 years, right? There's a plethora of data sitting with them, which now they're thinking about, how do I harness to make it not only predictive from their business perspective, but become a data company, right? Start selling data, start selling analytics. So these trends are going to be a game changer for the way how industries are looking at their overall data transformation strategy. That's what we see right now in the market.
Okay, thanks. Atul, let me just stick with you for a minute there. Because we've sort of all touched on the notion of breaking boundaries or becoming a boundaryless world. And I'd just like to see if you've got any thoughts about becoming a boundaryless enterprise.
Yep, great question, Greg. I think I think that that's where we are all heading to. It's definitely not one size fits all. I think this will directly relate to how the enterprises are ready today to embark on a purpose-driven agenda and value realization. See, the companies of future have to be thinking, or they may be acting right now, right? But I believe this 2020 pandemic has strengthened the discussions around purpose. So as we move on becoming a more boundaryless kind of a world, these common purpose statements will need to be deeply integrated into the company's operating and business models. Now, how do we see this, right? Ultimately, this will be realized through a series of digital transformations, led business shifts, and then from TCS point of view, when we look at it, right, we are looking at it more from a 3-horizon perspective. The first that the companies have to invest, if they have not done, is to make sure that they have a very, very strong digital core. So that is kind of laying your foundation for you to, at the end of the day, become more of a boundaryless world. And I'll show you what I think the journey looks like, right? So once you have a strong digital core, that's where comes your business model innovations, right? So you look at how do I make sure that my organization combines the power of digital technologies to create much more connected and personalized customer experiences. For example, let's say a customer in the retail industry, they have perfected and significantly invested in how they look at these angles. But industries like banking and manufacturing, they are kind of coming there. And the final one is transform and grow around purpose-led ecosystems. Because at the end of the day, what is the future is an ecosystem rather than a standalone enterprise. And as we start building these ecosystems, that's where the boundaries start to diminish and they start to get blurred. So that's where I see this this thing going, Greg, from that perspective.
Okay, thanks. Steve, let me come to you. Tracey talked about a local nest of connections. Can you elaborate on how artificial intelligence helps with that problem?
So there's a lot of information hidden or encoded. So if I think about a data historian, which is really nothing but a timestamp and a sensor reading and some other information that you might need to know what server is it located on, how do I address it, what are the units of measure, some basic information and not much else. There's usually a description in there that's hard to search, and some companies are better than others about saying what that sensor belongs to and what it's measuring. And artificial intelligence, machine learning, and these tools can help you dig that out. It can also do things like looking at PNIDs and relating the name of the sensor on the PNID to what you've called it in your data historian, what you've called it in your maintenance system, and find relationships and bring those things together more quickly than a human can, right? Because what you really have at a plant is you have an IT team that really understands deeply the data and the information that are in their systems, and you have subject matter experts that know what that data means and how it comes together. And most of the time, those people can't talk to each other. You know, usually every plant or every company has a few people that can cross that boundary, and they're in high demand. So you can use these more modern tools to get at that information faster and let the machine do some of the work and relate the information together.
Okay, and a follow-up question. There's a question here about the quality of data from the sensors. How should you think about that when you want to become data-driven?
In my case, we tried to focus on the quality first, and we spent a lot of time and had very little usable output from it. So we turned that around and we focused on, let's build the analytic we're looking for. And then if the data quality is no good, we'll go back and address it in the source system. And that went much faster, because if you're giving somebody bad information and they're making bad decisions on it, you're going to hear about it a lot faster than going back and looking at every sensor and saying, is that good or is that bad? So if you use this collaborative method, if you use an agile method like Tracey talked about, or as Atul spoke about, if you're a boundaryless organization and you've got your users with you as you're developing, they'll spot that bad data. You can go back and clean it up. You can go talk to your operators and say, hey, you know, every time you put this reading in, it's really important. If you're putting it in wrong, then somebody's going to make a bad decision off of it. It'll get better really fast. So to me, you focus on the outcome you want, go work on that. And if there's a source data problem, go back and fix it at the source.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
I would agree with Tracey, and I would take it one step further and see if I can, further govern the data so we don't get those issues over and over again.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I would add would be that, I mean, yes, I think all of us are generating just so many thousands and thousands of data points in everything. And it is, number one, it's about the integrity of that data. And we have commissioned some very sharp engineers to really cleanse that up. But then it's not just about cleaning it up, it's about keeping it clean, because then it becomes an ongoing process to assure that, your output is no better than what the input is, right? And you've got to make sure that that's on a constant basis remains clean. But the other thing I think that we recognized very early on, and it might not address specifically this question, but I think it goes back to the last one also, was, as a supply chain, we kind of came to the table and said, what analytics are we going to develop in-house and become experts in? And what are we going to go buy? And that's where, like, the augury came in. It was, hey, they've got a platform. We're not gonna go out and hire 20 or 30, data scientists to develop our machine health analytics platform, right? So I think some companies, and again, I talk to a lot of my peers in various food and beverage industries and whatnot, and a lot of them, the feedback that I've gotten is there is a struggle. They're still finding their way on what are we going to develop in-house versus what are we going to go out and source. And then that kind of, that really starts just setting you back in terms of your progress, right? Because, you may be chasing something that you really shouldn't be versus focused on what you should be, working on internally, right? So, I think we were able to quickly realize that we had to make those decisions quickly, so that we could move the peanut up the hill.
Okay.
Yeah, Warren, and I'll follow up with that. It's also a dynamic analysis, right? I mean, as the markets change and technology advances, you have to be willing to stop and say, maybe we shouldn't have developed that ourselves, and it's time to find a partner, right? Mm-hmm. Because, yep. I mean, we're a chemical company, right? So we're never going to have the brightest, sharpest software developers, right? That's software companies. So you have to have these partnerships and know who has the domain expert, right? Mm-hmm. And that's critical.
Yep, no, fully agree.
I've got a question for the panel. I'll just throw it out for the panel, and that is a question about innovation and digital transformation on the one hand, and then standards on the other hand. Do these two go together? How, what's the role of standards in this brave new world?
I'll start that one off. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Vikas.
I can go first. It's a fine balance. I would go back to what is your system of records? What is your standard processes? Let's not reinvent the wheel there, right? Let's get to the industry best practice, and to Tracey, what he said is let's we have very finite number of talent. Where do we really want to grow them, upskill them? And so let's use our partners wherever appropriate, right? So for example, and I'll come back to the second half, the second half of the question. Over the last 2 years, we made a conscious decision that, hey, TCS, and I've been working with them for over 20 years. You guys run and maintain. That's your bread and butter. Do it for us. Show us the industry best practices on how everybody else is doing it. So we move closer and closer towards standardization. Okay, that's where standardization, process standard. You can't do standardization in your application space unless you tie in with the business process transformation. So those two go hand in hand wherever appropriate. Where you really have to innovate is, you go back to your mega trends in your industry. What are the new business models that are going to be created? What is critical to your survival, right? So for LyondellBasell, couple of one big ticket item is we think a lot about sustainability and not just from the social factor of it, but how does that convert into a business model for us, right? So that's an area we want to innovate. We want to invest more of our time. The whole circular economy, right? How is recycling, how is carbon footprint, going to impact our future? So that's, you got to find that balance where you really have to differentiate between what is standard. I don't need to work on it and need to move it more and more towards standard business process standardization versus what's my bread and butter for the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Mhm. Steve, you were going to jump in about standards.
Yeah, I was going to say, Vikas has already talked about the business process part of it, but there's also you may find as you start to work that I need to change some standards, or some standards don't meet the requirements of where I want to go. You need your leadership to understand that, and you need to sort of lift the governance off of that and change it so that you can change quickly and then put the governance back on it, instead of trying to change it with the governance in place, because that will really slow the teams down a lot.
Okay.
So you have to recognize that as the leaders of these organizations, of when do I need to loosen the rules to go fast, and then when do I tighten them back down?
Yeah. So I kind of just add some more stuff on what Vikas and Steve just mentioned. So when we look at this, right? So I mean, we as TCS, right? This is a big thing for us in terms of making sure that the processes and other things are standardized, and the way we look at many of these large transformations. So that's why I kind of dwell back upon the point that I mentioned about make sure that your digital core is strongly founded, right? Because process standardization comes as a part of that. And on top of it, when we start to bring in large transformations or innovations, they become more incremental in nature. And wherever we have a big kind of a change or a shift, that's where start from the top, right? Involve the top, making sure that they are involved in this change process, and do it fast. If you have to fail fast, right? So that we know where those big ticket items lie for which you have to go for further changes in your overall process. But they have to go hand in hand.
Okay, thanks, Atul. All right, anybody else want to jump in on that question? We've got about 2 minutes left. No.
I'll just add real quick on the whole, on that part of the discussion that, yeah, we've seen that again as we start compiling data. I mean, from an R&D standpoint, and on a material side, from a material qualification, when we look at that side, then when we look on the production side, and as we roll out, our digital roadmap, that number one, the standards have to change. They've got to be updated, because everything today, or let's say yesterday, everything was paper and pencil and operators entering stuff in the MES and whatnot, right? Where tomorrow we need faster approvals, we need faster qualifications, but we've also got to revise our work, our operating procedures and our standards around how we manage within the factories. And one key learning we had also was, as we've started to implement Augmenteer, which is a digital workflow that's part of our strategy, we've realized, it could have been very easy, cut and paste documents and stick them in the workflow and then just follow. But what we realized was, when we put together the cross-functional team that was comprised of IT, manufacturing, quality, and R&D, was that we had a lot of stuff still active in place that today is no longer necessary. So we're able to adapt that and revise it into the workflow that we're doing, and it's really cutting a lot of the stuff that was no longer needed out, and we're really streamlining a lot of those standards and processes.
Okay, thanks, Warren. All right, well, with that, I think we've reached the end of our allotted time here. So I want to especially thank all of today's speakers, as well as today's panelists who've joined us here. Great job, everyone, and thanks so much for the good work and the really great insights. And also thanks to everyone who attended our session today. We really do appreciate it, and I hope you got something out of it. I think there was plenty here. So be sure to return to the conference tab, to the ARC conference, and I suspect this is probably the end of the day, but tomorrow there's going to be another series of great sessions. So please join us again tomorrow. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.